My brother convinced my parents to give him my entire $250,000 trust fund. Dad said, "He's the real genius. Go swing a hammer." I didn't argue. I walked away. 5 years later, they showed up at my headquarters. What they saw made Dad's knees buckle. "Hello, everyone. My name is Megan Carter. I'm 35 years old, and I learned the hard way that sometimes your own family will make you feel worthless just because they don't understand what you're capable of." When my grandfather died, he left me a $250,000 trust fund. It was supposed to help me build my future. Instead, my brother convinced my parents that he deserved it more. Dad looked me straight in the eyes and said, "He's the real genius. You, go swing a hammer." I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I simply walked away. 5 years later, my family showed up at my company headquarters. They expected to see the struggling construction worker they'd always looked down on. Instead, my father walked through the lobby, looked at the name on the wall, and suddenly went completely pale. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why I walked away from $250,000, you need to know what happened first. I grew up with one older brother, Daniel. Daniel was always considered the smart one. He loved computers. He talked about becoming an entrepreneur. My parents constantly told people he was going to be successful someday. I was different. I liked building things. I learned carpentry from my grandfather. He taught me how to repair furniture, frame walls, install flooring, and eventually manage renovation projects. I wasn't embarrassed by it. I loved working with my hands. After high school, I started working for a construction company. I slowly learned everything from estimating to project management. Then my grandfather passed away. He left me a trust fund worth $250,000. The money came with one condition. I couldn't access the entire amount immediately. It was meant to help me establish myself financially. I wanted to use it to start my own construction and renovation company. For the first time, I felt like I had a real opportunity. Then Daniel found out about the trust. One evening, my parents called me over. Daniel was already sitting at the kitchen table. Dad looked serious. "We need to talk about the trust." I nodded. "What about it?" Daniel leaned back. "I think the money should go toward my business." I stared at him. "What?" He explained that he'd found a technology startup opportunity. He needed capital. My parents thought it made more sense for him to use the money because he had greater potential. I looked at Mom. "You want to give him my trust?" She shook her head. "Not give, invest it. It's mine." Dad sighed. "Your grandfather wanted you to have a better future." "I know. And Daniel could turn that money into something much bigger." I laughed. "So could I." Daniel smirked. "You're going to build houses." "Yes." He shook his head. "That's not exactly genius level." Dad looked at me. Then came the sentence I'll never forget. "He's the real genius. You, go swing a hammer." The room went completely silent. I looked at my father, then at Daniel, then at Mom. Nobody corrected him. Nobody defended me. I finally understood. They had already decided that Daniel's dreams were more valuable than mine. I stood up. "Fine." Mom looked surprised. "Fine? Keep the money." Dad frowned. "You're being emotional." "No." I picked up my jacket. "I'm being realistic." Daniel smiled. I walked out. I didn't fight them. I didn't threaten them. I didn't ask for another chance. I simply decided that if they didn't believe in me, I'd stop trying to convince them. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to use the trust. I wasn't going to depend on my parents. And I wasn't going to let Daniel's opinion define me. I took the construction job I'd already been offered. I worked long hours, saved every dollar, and started doing small renovation projects on weekends. Kitchen remodels, bathrooms, decks, basements. At first, it was just me. Then I hired one employee. Then two. Eventually, I rented a small office. I named the company Carter Build and Design. I didn't tell my family. They rarely asked. Daniel was busy with his startup. My parents were convinced he was going to become wealthy. For almost 2 years, I heard about his progress constantly. Then one afternoon, Dad called. "How's your little construction business?" I smiled. "Doing well. Still swinging a hammer. Sometimes." He laughed. Daniel apparently had investors now. Mom told me, "Your brother is going places." I simply said, "Good for him." What they didn't know was that my company was growing faster than I had expected. I started getting larger contracts, commercial renovations, apartment complexes, office buildings. Then an investor approached me. He wanted to help me expand into property development. For the first time, I realized I wasn't just running a construction company. I could build something much bigger. 3 years passed. I barely spoke to my family. Then one morning, I received an email from an investment group. They wanted to meet. I almost ignored it, but I agreed. That meeting changed everything. They offered to fund a new division of my company, focused on commercial real estate development. The numbers were enormous. I accepted. Within a year, my company had expanded into several states. We were developing properties, renovating commercial buildings, and managing construction projects worth millions. I hired architects, engineers, project managers, financial analysts. I stopped swinging a hammer every day, but I never forgot where I started. Then, 5 years after that conversation with my parents, my company moved into a new headquarters. It was a massive glass building in downtown Dallas. The name Carter Development Group was displayed across the lobby wall. I stood there that morning looking at it. I thought about my grandfather. Then I thought about Dad's words. He's the real genius. You go swing a hammer. I smiled. I had done exactly that. I had swung the hammer, and I had built an empire with it. I hadn't spoken to Daniel in almost 5 years. Then one Monday morning, my assistant walked into my office. "There's a family here asking for you." I looked up. "What family?" She hesitated. "Your parents." My heart stopped for a second. "My parents?" She nodded. "And your brother." I leaned back in my chair. "What do they want?" "They said they came to see you." I almost laughed. 5 years. Not one birthday call. Not one apology. Not one question about how I was doing. And suddenly, they wanted to see me. I asked my assistant to send them up. A few minutes later, the elevator doors opened. My parents stepped out. Daniel followed them. Dad looked around the enormous office. His eyes moved across the glass walls, the employees, the company logo, the framed awards. Then he looked at me. I stood behind my desk. "Hi, Dad." He couldn't speak. Daniel looked around nervously. Mom whispered, "Is all of this yours?" I smiled. "Yes." Dad finally managed to say, "What happened to your little construction business?" I looked at him. It grew. He stared at me. Then his eyes moved toward a display, showing one of our newest development projects. I watched his expression change, but then Daniel suddenly stepped forward. "We need to talk about something." I nodded. "Okay." He looked uncomfortable. "About the trust." I froze. 5 years later, they had finally brought up the $250,000. But Daniel wasn't there to apologize. He was there to ask me for something. And when he told me why, I realized my family hadn't come to my headquarters because they were proud of what I'd built. They had come because they needed something from me. Sometimes, people don't come back because they miss you. They come back because they finally realize what they lost when they underestimated you. And when Daniel placed a folder on my desk and told me what had happened to the $250,000 trust they'd taken from me, I realized the brother they called a genius had made a mistake that could cost him everything. I looked at the folder. "What happened to the trust?" Daniel swallowed. "We lost it." I almost laughed. "You lost $250,000. Dad interrupted. "It wasn't that simple." I looked at him. "It was my money." Nobody answered. Daniel opened the folder. His startup had failed. The money from my trust had been used to fund his company, exactly as they had planned. But instead of becoming the success everyone predicted, Daniel had made one terrible decision after another. Bad investments, expensive equipment, failed partnerships. Eventually, the company collapsed. The entire $250,000 was gone. I looked at my father. "And you came here because?" Dad took a breath. "Daniel owes money." "How much?" "More than he can pay." I closed the folder. "That's unfortunate." Mom looked shocked. "You can help him." I smiled. "Why?" "Because you're successful." I leaned back. 5 years ago, you told me to go swing a hammer." Dad looked down. "I was wrong." "Yes, you've done incredibly well." "I know." He looked at me. "We're proud of you." I shook my head. "You weren't proud of me when I needed you." Silence filled the room. Daniel finally spoke. "I know I messed up." I looked at him. "You didn't just mess up." He lowered his eyes. "You took something that wasn't yours." "I know." "You convinced our parents that you deserved my trust fund." "I know." "And then you lost every dollar." "I know." I could see the embarrassment on his face. For the first time in my life, my brother wasn't acting like the genius everyone had promised he would become. He looked scared. I felt sorry for him, but sympathy wasn't the same as responsibility. Daniel said, "I need $400,000 to settle the remaining debts." I stared at him. "You're asking me for $400,000. He nodded. Dad immediately said, "You're more than capable of helping." I looked at my father. "Do you hear yourself?" He became quiet. 5 years ago, I had $250,000. You gave it to him. Now you want me to give him another $400,000. Mom started crying. "He's your brother." I nodded. "And I'm your daughter." She looked at me. "I know." "Then why was my future worth less than his?" She had no answer. I stood up and walked toward the window. From my office, I could see part of the city. 5 years earlier, I'd been working alone. Now my company occupied an entire building. Hundreds of employees depended on the decisions I made. I had built everything without the trust fund, without my parents, without Daniel. I turned around. I'm not giving Daniel $400,000. Dad looked disappointed, but I will do something else. Everyone looked at me. If he's willing to work, I'll give him a job. Daniel looked surprised. A job? Yes. Doing what? Operations assistant in one of our regional offices. He stared at me. You'd hire me. I'd give you an opportunity. Why? Because I don't want to see you destroy the rest of your life. He looked down. What about the debt? That's your responsibility. Dad immediately objected. That's not enough. I looked at him. Then you should have thought about that 5 years ago. Nobody spoke. Daniel accepted the job, not because he wanted to, because he had no better option. For the first few months, he struggled. He wasn't used to taking instructions. He wasn't used to being accountable. And he definitely wasn't used to being treated like everyone else. But slowly, he changed. He started showing up early. He learned. He listened. He eventually earned a promotion. One evening, he came to my office. I owe you an apology. I looked at him. For what? For everything. I waited. He continued. I thought I was smarter than you. I know. I thought you were wasting your life. I know. And when Dad offered me the trust fund, he looked down. I took it because I believed I deserved it. I nodded. You didn't. I know. He took a breath. But you still gave me a chance. I smiled. Don't waste it. I won't. My parents were different. They expected me to eventually give them money. When I didn't, they became distant again. That hurt less than it would have years earlier, because I finally understood something. They didn't need to become better parents for me to have a better life. I simply needed to stop expecting them to be different. Eventually, Dad called me. I owe you an apology. I listened. I was wrong about you. I smiled slightly. Yes, you were. I should never have said what I said. No, I thought Daniel was the one with the future. And now, he paused. Now I realize I never really understood either of my children. That was probably the most honest thing he'd ever said to me. Epilogue. Today, my company is still growing. We've expanded into several states. We're working on projects I couldn't have imagined when I was 24. And the $250,000 my grandfather left me, I never needed it to become successful. That's the irony. My family thought the money would determine which sibling had the better future. It didn't. Daniel lost it. I lost it too. But I lost something I never actually needed. I built my life without it. And eventually, I realized my grandfather had given me something far more valuable than money. He had given me the belief that I could build something of my own. My father couldn't take that away. Daniel couldn't take that away. Nobody could. Daniel still works for my company. Our relationship isn't perfect, but it's honest now. He knows I won't rescue him from every mistake. And I know he doesn't expect me to. As for my parents, we speak occasionally. There's still distance between us. Some wounds don't disappear simply because someone apologizes. But I no longer carry anger everywhere I go. I learned to let go without pretending the past didn't happen. The family that once told me I wasn't the genius eventually watched me build something far bigger than the future they had imagined for me. And the greatest part wasn't watching my father's knees buckle when he saw my headquarters. It was knowing that I had built that place without the $250,000 they thought would determine my future. I didn't need my brother's approval. I didn't need my parents' confidence. I didn't even need the trust fund. I only needed one person to believe in me. And eventually, that person was me.